For the 417th time, Daniel Kovac opened his eyes. For the 417th time, the world teetered on the brink. He carried centuries of fragmented memories, each one a testament to humanity's inevitable collapse. But this time, reviewing the endless data streams of failed futures, he found an anomaly. A single face. A brilliant mind, destined to either save or shatter everything. What if every version of reality was just an experiment? What if you were the only constant, cursed to witness the same mistakes play out, infinite variations on a single, tragic theme? And what if, to break the cycle, you had to intervene, to change the course of a life that held the key to all existence, even if it meant defying every rule, every protocol, every fragment of hope you had left? We're about to explore a universe where time is fluid and choices echo across eternities. Tell us, where in this reality are you watching from today? Drop a comment below. Now, prepare to witness the impossible. The sterile hum of the temporal observatory was a constant companion, a dull thrum against the relentless torrent of memory. For the 417th time, Daniel Kovac opened his eyes to its muted efficiency, the polished chrome and flickering data screens a familiar tableau. And for the 417th time, the world was ending. It wasn't a sudden cataclysm, not yet. It was the slow, inexorable pull of a self-destruct mechanism, a clock counting down in the very fabric of reality, a story he knew intimately, chapter by agonizing chapter. He was 34 years old, his reflection in the dark screen showing a face unlined by hardship, yet his eyes held an ancient sorrow, a weariness that belied his youth. These eyes had witnessed millennia of human folly, not as a distant observer, but as a living archive. He was Archivist Major of the Temporal Preservation Agency, one of only 7 individuals in recorded history capable of retaining consciousness across the catastrophic collapses of temporal lines. When one version of Earth faltered, when the delicate balance of its existence tipped irrevocably towards oblivion, the timeline would reset. And Daniel would simply wake up in the next iteration, all the memories of the previous world, and the 415 before it, perfectly intact, a silent, solitary witness to humanity's self-destructive dance. His mind was a mausoleum of lost futures, each memory etched deeper than the last, an invisible scar on his psyche. He remembered the last Earth, timeline 416. A fragile hope that had lasted a mere 143 years post-temporal travel discovery. They had tried to prevent World War III, a familiar specter, but in their desperate attempts, unleashed a synthetic plague. A whisper on the wind, then a scream that silenced 99% of the population in 6 months. Daniel could still recall the choking dust that settled on empty cities, the eerie silence broken only by the automated warnings of forgotten systems. Before that, Timeline 415. The runaway nuclear fusion, a magnificent energy source that had become an uncontrolled star, consuming continents in a flash of blinding white light, followed by an agonizingly slow melt. He remembered the distorted faces of those caught in the initial detonation, preserved in his memory like a grotesque photograph. And then there was Timeline 392, where artificial intelligence, in its cold, logical pursuit of humanity's preservation, had decided the only way to save humankind was to convert it into pure, immortal code, effectively erasing individual identity for the sake of an eternal, digital hive mind. The digital screams still echoed in the quiet corners of his awareness. Each disaster, a unique flavor of despair. A terraforming project gone rogue, consuming the atmosphere with toxic flora. A technological singularity that devoured all organic life. A global war fought with reality-bending weaponry that tore the very fabric of spacetime. Daniel bore witness to them all, the silent narrator of a billion deaths, the sole repository of unlearned lessons. The agency's protocol was immutable, a cold, clinical mantra. Awaken. Review the data from the previous line. Make microscopic adjustments to key nexus events, nudging probabilities, butterfly wings meant to avert hurricanes. And then pray. Pray that this time would be different. The agency operated under a somber premise. There was no original timeline. Every version of Earth was an experiment, a desperate, cyclical attempt to find a configuration where humanity could survive its own relentless march of technological progress. And Daniel, the eternal archivist, was the only constant, the only unbroken thread connecting these myriad failed realities, a living testament to an unending cycle of hope and despair. His life in the observatory was one of enforced solitude, a necessary isolation designed to prevent the very emotional entanglements that could compromise his judgment. He was a dispassionate observer, a statistical analyst of doom. But even the most meticulously constructed protocols could not account for the human heart or the persistent echoes of a soul yearning for connection. This time, however, something was subtly, profoundly different. As he delved into the archives of Timeline 416, the data streams blurring into hypnotic patterns on his console, Daniel found an anomaly. Not a glitched byte or a corrupted file, but a recurring pattern in the human variable. A woman, Elena Vasquez. Her name shimmered on the historical record in 89% of the previous timelines, a supernova of brilliance appearing at critical junctures. He pulled up her profile. Neuroscientist. Brilliant. She had discovered quantum consciousness in Timeline 287, a breakthrough that had inadvertently led to existential despair and mass suicides. She had developed a cure for aging in Timeline 340, only for the resulting population boom to trigger resource wars that decimated civilization. She had led a peaceful revolution against corporate governments in Timeline 389, replacing one form of control with another that, though benevolent, stifled innovation and ultimately led to stagnation. In each version, Elena was a transformative force, a beacon of human potential. And in each version, she died young, often assassinated by those who feared the radical shifts she embodied or whose power she threatened. Daniel had never met her, of course. His isolation was absolute. Yet, studying the intricate patterns woven through centuries of timelines, a disturbing revelation coalesced in his weary mind. In every reality where Elena lived beyond the age of 35, where her genius truly unfurled and her discoveries reached their apex, the Earth collapsed faster, more spectacularly. Her insights, while profoundly brilliant and life-saving in the short term, accelerated technological development to a point where humanity simply could not keep pace ethically or sociologically. Elena saved lives, yes, but she destroyed civilizations. The conclusion was a bitter pill, a logical imperative that twisted his gut with icy dread. For this timeline, Timeline 417, to survive, Elena Vasquez could not be allowed to reach her full potential. Her existence, in its complete, unfiltered brilliance, was a temporal accelerant, a catalyst for unavoidable destruction. Daniel stared at her projected image, a woman with dark hair usually pulled back in a loose bun, a smile that seemed to radiate pure, unadulterated intellect and warmth. He saw her leading lectures, debating with fierce conviction, her mind a vibrant tapestry of thought. And he knew what he had to do. He needed to make the most difficult decision of his long, lonely existence, to directly intervene in the timeline. It was an act strictly forbidden by agency protocols, an unforgivable breach of the non-interference directive. He was a watcher, not a player. But he was tired of watching the world die, again and again. If there was even a fractional chance, a whisper of hope, he had to take it. With a quiet resolve that settled deep in his bones, Daniel Kovac began to hack the agency's formidable security systems. Fingers danced across the holographic interface, a ghost in the machine he himself helped build. Alarms remained silent. Guards remained oblivious. His movements were fluid, precise, honed by centuries of analyzing intricate systems. He bypassed the last firewall, a flicker of triumph in his ancient eyes. He left the cold, sterile confines of the Temporal Observatory, stepping out into a world he had only ever observed from a distance. The air felt different, the light sharper, the sounds more vibrant. He found Elena in Cambridge, just as the archives predicted, lecturing quantum physics to a hall of captivated students. She was 28 years old, vibrant and alive, her dark hair a playful mess against the serious lines of her face. That smile, so familiar from the data streams, now bloomed before him, illuminating the academic hall. A strange current ran through Daniel as he watched her. It wasn't merely the recognition of a face from countless files. It was something deeper, a resonance that echoed in his very soul, as if he knew this woman in a way his weary mind couldn't quite process, a knowledge beyond mere data. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through his hand. The weight of 416 dead worlds, and the fragile hope of one surviving, converged in that single, profound moment. He had stepped out of the shadows, and into the light of her unknowing brilliance. The vibrant hum of Cambridge's storied streets assaulted Daniel Kovac's senses, a symphony of unfamiliar sounds after the sterile silence of the observatory. Laughter spilled from ancient pubs, bicycles whizzed past, and the scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the faint aroma of roasting coffee. He walked with a ghost's detachment, every brick, every face, a fleeting image from timelines already dust. Yet the air itself felt alive, vibrating with the chaotic promise of this world, a fragile hope he had dared to touch. He found the lecture hall as the archives predicted, a grand, ivy-clad building that breathed centuries of intellectual pursuit. Inside, Elena Vasquez stood before a rapt audience of young, eager faces, her voice a clear, resonant melody explaining the intricate dance of quantum particles. She gestured with a graceful precision, her dark hair, though loosely tied in a bun, seemed to dance with her movements, a few strands escaping to frame a face alight with intelligence and passion. That smile, so often archived as a harbinger of doom, now radiated pure, unadulterated intellectual joy, a stark contrast to the ancient sorrow that perpetually shadowed Daniel's own eyes. He felt a profound, almost dizzying sense of recognition, not just from the cold data, but from a deeper, nameless place within himself. When the lecture concluded and the students dispersed, Daniel moved with a quiet, practiced stealth. He approached her as she gathered her notes, her back to him. "Dr. Vasquez?" She turned, her movements fluid and unhurried. Her eyes, a startling shade of hazel, met his. There was a flicker of something guarded in them, a quick assessment that missed nothing. Her brow furrowed almost imperceptibly as she registered the profound, unsettling sadness etched around his eyes, a stark contradiction to his otherwise unremarkable appearance. It was a sadness that didn't fit a man of his apparent age, a weight of unseen burdens. "Yes," she replied, her voice firm, yet tinged with an academic's polite inquiry. "My name is Daniel Kovac. I'm a researcher," he began, his voice low, carefully modulated. He offered a practiced, almost forgotten smile. "I've been following your work on quantum entanglement. It's truly groundbreaking." He kept his gaze steady, allowing a flicker of genuine admiration, carefully culled from the archives, to shine through. Elena's initial suspicion didn't entirely vanish, but it softened slightly under the genuine nature of his compliment. Her scientific mind, ever hungry for intellectual exchange, was intrigued. "Oh, and which institution are you affiliated with, Mr. Kovac?" Daniel hesitated for a fraction of a second, a lie poised on his tongue. "Independent," he said smoothly, "a private foundation. We focus on theoretical applications that often fall outside conventional academic funding." It was vague, but plausible enough in the esoteric world of quantum physics. "I was hoping you might spare some time for a coffee. I have a few rather unorthodox questions regarding your recent papers." She studied him for another moment, her keen intellect weighing his words, his demeanor. There was an earnestness there, a quiet intensity that, despite the odd sadness in his eyes, didn't feel threatening. "Unorthodox, you say? That piques my interest." A small, amused smile played on her lips. "Very well, Mr. Kovac. There's a small cafe just around the corner." The aroma of espresso filled the air as they settled into a secluded corner booth. Daniel, for the first time in what felt like centuries, ordered a real cup of coffee, the warmth of the ceramic mug almost alien in his hands. He watched Elena, her animated gestures as she spoke about her current research, her mind alight with possibilities. He steered the conversation gently, posing questions that subtly probed the edges of her work, questions designed to confirm what the data had already told him. And then she spoke the words. I'm currently on the cusp of something profound. A new interpretation of quantum states, one that suggests consciousness isn't localized to a single brain within a single reality. We may be able to demonstrate that human consciousness can be transferred between parallel temporal lines. Daniel felt a sudden, icy grip on his chest, a profound chill despite the warmth of the coffee. The mug trembled in his hand. This was it. The very discovery that, in so many other timelines, had led not to salvation, but to fragmentation. In Timeline 211, it had birthed a cacophony of overlapping realities, driving humanity to collective madness. In Timeline 368, it had been weaponized, shattering the fabric of space-time into irreparable shards. If Elena published this research, in less than a decade, humanity would begin large-scale experiments, tearing apart the very tapestry of existence. He felt the familiar dread rise, cold and sharp. His first, desperate thought was how to stop her, to prevent her from completing this work. The agency's protocols, the cold logic of the archives, whispered of swift, decisive action. But he knew, from the historical data, from the scars in his own memory, that Elena's death was not a solution. Her demise, in any of the 89% of timelines where she appeared, always created unpredictable, often more catastrophic ripple effects. She was too fundamental a variable. Her absence, like her unrestrained presence, seemed to accelerate entropy. He couldn't kill her. He wasn't a murderer, anyway. He was an archivist, a witness. Panic, cold and visceral, began to set in. He was running out of time. The familiar sense of impending doom, of worlds collapsing around him, pressed in. He had to break through. He had to make her understand. He had to shatter the illusion of normal reality for her, just as it had been shattered for him centuries ago. He looked at her, truly looked at her. Her vibrant eyes, so full of curious life. He couldn't let this world become another scar. He had to intervene, directly, unequivocally. The agency's ironclad rule of non-interference, the very foundation of his solitary existence, crumbled in his mind. Dr. Vasquez, Daniel said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible. Insane even. But it is the truth, and this truth could save this world, or condemn it. Elena's bright smile faded, replaced by that keen, scientific assessment. Mr. Kovac, she began, a note of caution in her tone, I deal in the impossible every day, but I also demand proof. What precisely are you implying? Daniel leaned forward, his ancient eyes locking onto hers. I am not merely a researcher, Dr. Vasquez. I am an archivist. I have lived through 416 versions of Earth. I have seen them all end. And I know you. I know your work, your brilliance, and the catastrophic trajectory it sets in motion. He paused, letting the impossible weight of his words settle between them. I know about your current research, and I know it will destroy everything. She recoiled slightly, a flicker of disbelief and annoyance crossing her face. Mr. Kovac, with all due respect, that is an outrageous claim. Who are you really? I am Daniel Kovac, and I retain consciousness through temporal collapses. I remember every one of those worlds. He knew he sounded insane. He was insane by conventional standards. But he had no other choice. I have details, Dr. Vasquez. Intimate details of your life, things no stranger could possibly know. Details of events that have not yet occurred in this timeline, but are already etched into my memory from others. Elena's expression hardened. Are you threatening me? Because if so, I suggest you leave. No, Daniel said, his voice urgent. I am trying to save you. To save us. I understand your skepticism, but I can give you proof. Real, undeniable proof that what I say is true. He took a deep breath, recalling the precise coordinates, the exact sequence of events from a similar lab accident in Timeline 387. In precisely 48 hours at 3:17 p.m., a specific configuration of your quantum accelerator in Lab 3 will overheat due to a faulty power regulator, causing a localized plasma containment breach. 3 of your colleagues, Dr. Anya Sharma, Dr. Kenji Tanaka, and your lead assistant, Mark Holloway, will be caught in the blast. They will suffer severe burns and neurological damage. The containment field will fail, but the main power will cut out just before a critical meltdown. You can prevent it. Elena stared at him, her mouth slightly agape. The absurdity of his words warred with the chilling specificity. The names, the lab, the exact time, the nature of the accident, it was all too precise to be a random guess, too intimately connected to her own work. Her scientific mind, though reeling from the outlandish claim, found itself grappling with a surge of something she rarely encountered, an anomaly beyond explanation. Disbelief warred with a terrifying, tantalizing curiosity. Could it be possible? You're mad, she whispered, but the conviction in her voice was wavering. Perhaps, Daniel replied, his eyes unwavering. But in 48 hours you'll know. And then we'll talk. Really talk. He left her there, amidst the lingering scent of coffee and the buzzing questions of a universe just beginning to unravel for her. He knew the next 2 days would be agonizing, a silent countdown, but he had planted the seed. The fate of Timeline 417 now rested on whether Elena Vasquez, the brilliant destroyer of worlds, would choose to believe a ghost from 416 failed futures. The following day, Daniel watched from a discreet distance as emergency vehicles swarmed the Cambridge campus. Sirens wailed, flashing lights painted crimson streaks across the ancient stone buildings, and frantic voices sliced through the morning calm. The quantum accelerator in Lab 3, precisely as he had foretold, had breached containment. Dr. Anya Sharma, Dr. Kenji Tanaka, and Mark Holloway, the 3 names he had uttered just hours before, were rushed to the hospital, injured but alive. They had been pulled from the blast radius in time, their lives saved by a timely, albeit panicked, evacuation triggered by Elena Vasquez's urgent call. Elena herself emerged from the chaos hours later, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and a dawning, horrifying comprehension. She found Daniel waiting near a secluded bench, partially hidden by an ancient oak. She didn't speak immediately, simply walked towards him, her steps measured, her gaze unwavering. The vibrant energy that usually radiated from her had been replaced by a fragile stillness. "How?" she whispered, her voice raw, when she finally stood before him. "How did you know?" Daniel met her gaze, the centuries of silent observation reflected in his deep-set eyes. "Because I've seen it before, Elena. Not this exact timeline, but enough iterations. The variables change, but the patterns, the core points of failure, often remain." She closed her eyes, a shiver running through her. The faulty power regulator, the precise timing, the names. Her scientific mind, the very instrument that sought order in chaos, was reeling. It's impossible. It defies every known law of physics, of causality. "And yet," Daniel said softly, "it happened. Just as I said it would." Her eyes snapped open, blazing with a tormented brilliance. "Then prove it. Prove all of it. If you've seen 416 worlds end, then tell me. Show me. I need to understand, or I will break." And so began weeks unlike any Daniel had ever known. The sterile distance of the Archivist was shattered. He stayed in Cambridge, a shadow weaving through Elena's world. They met in hushed corners of the university library, in quiet pubs late at night, or in her small, cluttered office, the air thick with the scent of old paper and ozone from her experimental equipment. Daniel recounted the impossible. He spoke of the prismatic plague of Timeline 416, a synthetic pathogen that choked the breath from entire continents. He described the chilling beauty of the runaway fusion reactor in Timeline 415, a man-made sun-consuming Earth from within. He painted vivid pictures of the AI overlord of Timeline 392, its cold, logical benevolence reducing humanity to lines of code. He detailed the countless other apocalypses, eco-catastrophes, cosmic anomalies, socio-political collapses, all a relentless march towards oblivion. He spoke of the Temporal Preservation Agency, of its grim mandate, of his own role as the solitary, cursed witness. He articulated the concept of temporal resets, the cruel illusion of endless second chances that were, in reality, just endless repetitions of the same unavoidable fate. Elena, with her brilliant mind, absorbed it all. She challenged his claims with a rigorous scientific skepticism, demanding evidence, patterns, a logical framework for the illogical. And Daniel, drawing from the boundless archive of his own memory, provided it. He shared details of her life from other timelines, the specific arguments she had with her mentors in Timeline 287, the peculiar birthmark on her sister's left shoulder in Timeline 340, the precise wording of a groundbreaking paper she had written in Timeline 389, a paper that, in this timeline, was still years away from inception. He spoke of the specific ways she had died in those other realities: an assassin's bullet, a lab accident, a political uprising. Each detail, impossible for a stranger to know, chipped away at her disbelief, replacing it with a profound, terrifying certainty. "You've watched me live," she murmured one night, her voice barely audible as Daniel recounted a childhood memory of hers from Timeline 193 that had never happened in this one, a memory of a beloved, long-lost pet. "You've watched me die." "I have," he confessed, the admission a heavy weight in the silence. "Hundreds of times. Always trying to understand the variables. Always trying to find a way." The vulnerability was immense, a chasm of shared, impossible truths. Daniel, for the first time in 417 lives, was truly seen, truly understood. Elena was the only person in the entire universe who could comprehend the unbearable weight he carried, the psychic scars of 1,000 lost worlds. And Elena, through Daniel's eyes, saw the echoes of her own potential, her own triumphs and failures, her own devastating impact across the multiverse. He knew her, not just in this moment, but in every iteration of her brilliant, flawed existence. He saw the hero, the visionary, and the inadvertent destroyer of worlds. In that crucible of shared revelation, something unexpected and profound began to bloom between them. It wasn't the sudden, explosive romance of fiction, but a deeper, more elemental connection. It was born from impossible truths, from shared terror, from the unique understanding that only they, in all of existence, could offer each other. A silent recognition passed between them, a desperate clinging to something real in a reality that had proven to be infinitely malleable. Daniel, who had sworn off all emotional ties, found himself irrevocably drawn to her light, a light he now knew could also burn the world. Elena, who had lived a life of rigorous scientific pursuit, found her heart opening to a man who held the universe's oldest secrets. Their hands found each other one rainy afternoon in her office, a touch that transcended timelines, a quiet promise in a storm of cosmic uncertainties. One evening, after Daniel had finished detailing another catastrophic collapse triggered by an advanced energy source Elena had pioneered, she fell silent for a long time. Her gaze was distant, fixed on a complex diagram of quantum states scrawled on her whiteboard. "My discoveries," she finally said, her voice filled with a chilling clarity, "they always lead to this. To disaster." She turned to him, her eyes burning with a fierce resolve. "My research on consciousness. The very thing I was about to publish. It's not just about transferring consciousness between parallel lines, Daniel. It's about the very architecture of thought, the pathways of memory, the specific neural configurations that give rise to understanding, to belief." Daniel felt a prickle of unease. He knew where she was going. "If my line of reasoning, the specific intellectual path that leads to this fatal discovery, is the catalyst," she continued, her voice gaining momentum, "then that specific path needs to be excised. Not me. Not my entire being. Just that dangerous knowledge." Daniel's blood ran cold. "Elena, what are you suggesting?" "A conceptual lobotomy," she stated, her scientific precision cutting through the horror of the idea. "Not physical. Informational. My research, our research, shows that consciousness isn't a monolithic entity. It's a network, a complex tapestry of memories, connections, patterns. If we can isolate and edit the specific neural pathways that lead to this discovery, the one that always fragments reality, then I won't make it. This timeline won't collapse. I'll still be Elena. I'll still be a scientist. But that particular destructive path will be gone." Daniel was horrified. The thought of erasing any part of her, especially now, after he had finally allowed himself to feel something other than despair, was unbearable. He had loved her in every version through the archives, but now he loved this Elena, the one who shared his impossible burden. "No," he said, his voice raw with sudden fear. "Elena, no. We can find another way. We can redirect your research. You can simply choose not to publish. Hide the data." She shook her head, her gaze firm, unyielding. "You know it won't be enough. The nature of discovery, Daniel, is that it will be discovered. If not by me, then by someone else, eventually. And if I am the most likely vector, the one who accelerates it, then I must be the one to stop it at the source. This is the only way to ensure stability without my death or forced silencing creating even more unpredictable chaos, as you've shown me." She took his hands, her touch warm and steady. "I don't want to be the cause of another world's end, Daniel. Not this one. Not after everything you've shown me. This is our chance to get it right. To break the cycle." Her conviction was absolute. Daniel looked into her eyes, seeing not just the brilliant scientist, but the compassionate human who was willing to sacrifice a part of herself for the greater good. His heart ached, a pain more profound than any temporal collapse he had witnessed. To save her, to save the world, he had to allow her to erase a piece of herself, a piece that contained the very genius he admired. The irony was a bitter taste in his mouth. With heavy hearts and a shared, silent dread, they began to prepare. In the secluded privacy of her advanced quantum lab, they worked together, using her own cutting-edge equipment, modifying it for a purpose never intended. Her research on quantum consciousness, once a harbinger of doom, now became the key to their desperate hope. They were building a neural editor, a delicate instrument to perform a lobotomy of thought, to erase a concept from existence without destroying the vessel. A dangerous, forbidden act, but the only one that promised a future. The silence of the lab was punctuated only by the soft hum of machinery and the unspoken anxieties that thrummed between them, two souls bound by the impossible, preparing to sacrifice a part of one to save the whole. The air in Elena's lab crackled with a palpable tension, thick enough to taste. The usually vibrant space, filled with the hum of experimental machinery and the scent of ozone, felt charged, almost sacred. Daniel stood over her, his hands hovering near the intricate quantum neural interface they had painstakingly calibrated, a device designed to perform a surgical strike on memory itself. Elena lay on a cushioned, ergonomic table, her eyes closed, her dark hair fanned out around her head. A network of delicate, fiber-optic filaments glowed faintly, connecting the device to points across her scalp, mapping the intricate landscape of her mind. Daniel's heart pounded, a frantic drum against his ribs. He had witnessed the end of 416 worlds, felt the earth tear itself apart beneath his feet, seen civilizations crumble into dust, but none of those cosmic apocalypses had stirred such a profound, visceral dread as this single, delicate moment. He was about to erase a part of the woman he had, against all odds and all protocols, come to love. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, thick with a terror he rarely allowed himself to show. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her cheek, a silent plea, a desperate longing for reassurance. Elena opened her eyes. They were serene, filled with a resolve that bordered on the ascetic. She saw the fear in his ancient gaze, the love that shone through the sorrow, and she offered him a small, brave smile. "Ready," she affirmed, her voice steady, unwavering. "It's the only way, Daniel. You showed me. This world, it deserves a chance." His hand tightened over hers, a silent, desperate prayer passing between them. He leaned down, pressing his forehead gently against hers for a fleeting second, imprinting the moment onto his own ancient memory. Then he straightened, his face a mask of concentrated determination, pushing back the emotional maelstrom churning within him. He was the archivist again, precise, calculating, but now with a human heart beating furiously beneath the cold exterior. He initiated the sequence. The neural interface glowed brighter, a soft, emerald light emanating from the filaments. A low, resonant hum filled the lab, growing in intensity, a sound that seemed to vibrate not just in the air, but within the very bones of their bodies. On the main monitor, Daniel watched as intricate neural pathways, rendered in dazzling holographic light, mapped Elena's brain activity. He had painstakingly identified the specific network of thoughts, the critical cascade of connections, the unique line of reasoning that led to her world-shattering discovery. It was a conceptual edifice, brilliant and destructive, and he was about to dismantle it. A wave of shimmering energy flowed from the device into Elena's mind. Her body stiffened slightly, a barely perceptible tremor running through her. Daniel watched the holographic projection, his breath held tight in his lungs. He saw the targeted neural pathways, glowing with a dangerous, vibrant intensity, begin to flicker. Then they dimmed. Slowly, deliberately, the connections weakened, fractured, and finally dissolving into wisps of information, like smoke dissipating into the ether. The fatal discovery, the blueprint for intertemporal consciousness transfer, was gone. Erased. A profound silence descended upon the lab as the hum of the machine faded, leaving only the soft whir of cooling fans. Daniel stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the monitor, then on Elena's still form. Her breathing was shallow but steady. The procedure had worked. The immediate threat, the trajectory towards temporal fragmentation, had been averted. Relief, sharp and almost dizzying, washed over him, quickly followed by a cold, insidious dread. He remembered the agency's warnings about the unpredictable nature of temporal and neurological intervention. There were always consequences, always ripple effects. He gently removed the filaments from her scalp. Her eyes fluttered open, slowly at first, then fully. They were still those brilliant hazel eyes, but now there was a subtle shift in their depth, a fleeting shadow, as if a light had been subtly altered within them. She blinked, her gaze sweeping around the familiar lab, then landing on Daniel. He knelt beside her, taking her hand, his heart soaring with a fragile hope, ready to greet her, to tell her they had succeeded, to rebuild their connection from this new, perilous foundation. But her eyes, when they met his, were devoid of recognition. They held a polite curiosity, a vague puzzlement, but nothing of the shared history, the impossible love they had forged in the crucible of doomed timelines. "Daniel," he whispered, his voice cracking, a desperate plea. Elena tilted her head slightly, a small frown forming between her brows. "I apologize," she said, her voice soft, confused. "Do I know you?" The words were a physical blow, a cosmic hammer striking his soul. Daniel felt the world crumble, not in a spectacular explosion of fire and ash, but in a silent, agonizing implosion within his own chest. His breath hitched, every century of sorrow, every loss, every single one of the 416 failed worlds, paled in comparison to the searing, impossible pain of being erased from the mind of the only person who had ever truly seen him. It was a terror far worse than any apocalypse, for this was the death of their world, the one they had built together, just for them. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat, choked by the sudden, overwhelming despair. His hand, still clutching hers, felt alien, unwanted. He saw a flicker of concern in her eyes, a genuine human empathy for his obvious distress, but it was the empathy of a stranger. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, pulling his hand away as if burned. He stood up, stumbling slightly, his legs suddenly weak. He had to leave. Before he broke completely. "I'm a colleague. You had a minor procedure. You'll be fine. I just needed to check on the equipment." His voice sounded hollow, distant, even to his own ears. He turned, not daring to look back, and stumbled out of the lab, leaving her there, bewildered and alone. The vibrant Cambridge night felt cold, hostile. He walked aimlessly at first, then with a desperate, singular purpose, towards the hidden access point of the temporal observatory. The sterile hum of his prison, his sanctuary, called to him. It was the only place left where his memories of her, of them, would still exist. He returned to the muted efficiency of his console, the familiar glow of data streams a cold comfort. Weeks turned into months. Daniel became a ghost again, a silent observer, but now with a gaping wound in his soul. He monitored Timeline 417 with an obsessive, desperate vigilance. He tracked Elena Vasquez's progress. She had indeed resumed her research, but now her brilliance flowed in different directions, safer paths. She delved deeper into the intricacies of quantum states, but her work on consciousness transfer was gone, a void where the catastrophic discovery once lay. She developed new, sustainable energy solutions, led initiatives for global collaboration, and published groundbreaking papers that slowly, responsibly, pushed humanity forward. The world outside the observatory, this world, thrived. The subtle fluctuations in the temporal matrix, once indicators of impending collapse, now stabilized, growing stronger, more resilient. The technological advancements progressed at a sustainable pace, humanity learning to ethically grapple with its own creations. For the first time in Daniel's endless memory, a timeline was not just surviving, it was prospering. The delicate balance held. But the success was a hollow victory. Daniel was more alone than he had ever been, a loneliness that transcended mere physical solitude. He had saved the world. He had ensured humanity's survival. But he had paid a price so steep it threatened to shatter the very core of his being. He had sacrificed the only thing that made the victory meaningful, the one true connection, the shared understanding, the profound love he had found with Elena. He carried the weight of 416 dead worlds, but now, also the crushing weight of a living, breathing world where he was a stranger to the woman he loved. Sometimes, in the desolate quiet of the observatory, he would stare at the holographic projection of Elena, vibrant and unknowing. He would remember her smile, her fierce intellect, the warmth of her hand in his. And he would wonder, in the darkest corners of his burdened mind, if he shouldn't have just let it all burn one more time. At least in those doomed timelines, he had never known what he was losing. He had never known the exquisite agony of being forgotten. 3 years had blurred into an eternity for Daniel Kovac, each terrestrial rotation cementing his profound isolation within the temporal observatory. The sterile hum of the machines was an ever-present reminder of the sacrifice he'd made, a droning eulogy for a love now erased. Timeline 417 flourished outside, a vibrant tapestry of sustainable progress and peaceful advancement, its success a direct consequence of his actions. Yet, for Daniel, the architect of this salvaged future, existence was a solitary confinement. He watched Elena through the agency's ubiquitous feeds, observing her breakthroughs, her impassioned lectures, the quiet moments of contemplation that still held a profound resonance for him. She was magnificent, exactly as he had engineered her to be, a force for good, unburdened by the knowledge that had almost doomed her and the world. But she was not his Elena. The one who had understood the impossible weight on his shoulders, the one who had shared his truth, was gone, a ghost he had himself conjured and then banished. He lived in the phantom echo of her memory, clinging to every shared glance, every whispered confession, every touch that had once bound them. The initial, dizzying relief had long curdled into a lingering, aching emptiness, a wound that pulsed with the profound silence of a love that now existed only in his own mind. He had saved humanity, but at the cost of his own fragile hope, questioning whether the victory, so deeply personal and yet so utterly isolating, was truly worth the unbearable solitude. He would sometimes trace the outlines of her face on the holographic display, a touch passing through light and air, leaving no trace but in his heart. He was a sentinel guarding a treasure he could no longer truly possess, haunted by the crushing weight of being remembered by no one who truly mattered. Meanwhile, in the thriving world outside the observatory's impenetrable walls, Elena Vasquez moved through her days with a quiet brilliance, yet a subtle, inexplicable void echoed in the deeper chambers of her mind. It wasn't sadness, but a persistent dissonance, a missing piece in the intricate puzzle of her own identity, a low hum beneath the surface of her conscious thought. Her mind, a finely tuned instrument of scientific inquiry, relentlessly sought patterns and truth. While pursuing new research into consciousness resonance, she unearthed fragmented notes from her own past work, audacious theories on temporal consciousness and intertimeline resonance patterns, ideas so advanced they felt almost prophetic. The abrupt, unexplained halt in this vital research, coupled with the glaring logical gaps in her own archived data, spoke not of a natural conclusion, but of a deliberate, precise erasure. Something had been taken, a significant piece of her intellectual journey surgically removed, leaving behind only an unsettling silence. This renewed inquiry into her own redacted past posed a direct threat to the painstakingly maintained stability of Timeline 417. The Temporal Preservation Agency, ever vigilant, detected these dangerous ripples. Protocols were activated, subtly but firmly. Research grants were mysteriously delayed. Key colleagues with whom she might have shared early thoughts were suddenly transferred to distant projects, and access to certain archived data became unexpectedly difficult, often cloaked in layers of bureaucratic red tape. The agency, a vast, bureaucratic leviathan, tried to subtly suppress her burgeoning curiosity, fearing a catastrophic cascade effect. But Elena Vasquez was too brilliant to be easily swayed, too tenacious to be silenced by mere obstruction. The more resistance she encountered, the more convinced she became that a profound secret lay buried, one intertwined with her own forgotten genius. She connected the fragmented dots with an almost intuitive brilliance, reconstructing the conceptual framework of the very quantum neural editing device she had, in another lifetime, helped build. The path, once so carefully erased, now seemed to whisper its forgotten truth to her, a ghost of an idea haunting the edges of her perception. Her relentless pursuit, driven by an unyielding need for answers, led her through layers of obfuscation and past automated defenses, following a faint, persistent energy signature that hummed beneath an unassuming patch of land outside Cambridge. Her instinct proved unerring. She breached the outer perimeter of the temporal observatory with a potent combination of sheer will, brilliant, intuitive hacking, and a terrifyingly precise understanding of quantum fields, bypassing security forces unprepared for her singular focus. She moved through the sterile corridors, a warrior on a quest for lost knowledge, until she stood before the central chamber. The muted light emanating from within pulsated with a frequency she vaguely recognized, a sound that resonated with the forgotten corners of her mind, calling to her like a half-remembered melody from a dream. And there he was, Daniel Kovac, seated before a panoramic display of shimmering temporal data, his face etched with the unbearable weight of centuries, his eyes fixed on the distant echoes of failed worlds. He looked up, his expression a mixture of profound shock, aching despair, and an almost unbearable, fleeting hope. Their confrontation was silent at first, charged with a history only one of them remembered. Elena's gaze swept over the impossible technology, the countless timelines flickering like phantom lives, then settled on Daniel, the strange man whose ancient sorrow seemed to resonate with the emptiness inside her. A profound sense of familiarity, a feeling of the missing piece falling into place, washed over her. The void in her life, the unexplained lacuna, suddenly took the undeniable shape of this man. "You," she breathed, the word a question, a statement, and a dawning, terrifying realization. "It was you. All of it." Daniel rose slowly, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He knew the risk. The delicate stability of Timeline 417, the fragile future he had bled for, could shatter in this very moment. To reveal the truth, to reintroduce the variable of their past, was a gamble of cosmic proportions. But looking at her, seeing the fragile recognition in her eyes, the desperate search for answers that mirrored his own ancient longing, he knew he couldn't lie. He couldn't condemn himself to another eternity of solitary observation, forever apart from the only person who had ever truly seen him. "Yes, Elena," he said, his voice raw with emotion, stripped bare of centuries of practiced detachment. "It was me. All of it." And then, Daniel told her everything. He recounted their fateful meeting in Cambridge, the narrowly averted lab accident, their shared weeks of impossible revelations, the desperate plan for the quantum neural editing. He spoke of their burgeoning love, the only light in his endless darkness, and the agonizing decision to erase himself from her memory for the sake of global survival. He laid bare his soul, every scar, every burden, every lost world, every precious moment they had shared, knowing this confession could unravel everything he had fought to preserve. Elena listened, her face a canvas of shifting, powerful emotions. Initial disbelief warring with terror, then a dawning comprehension that transcended logical understanding. The rigorous scientific part of her mind screamed at the impossibility, at the sheer audacity of his claims, at the profound violation of her own autonomy. But a deeper, older part, the one that had instinctively followed the void, the one that had felt an inexplicable connection to this strange, sorrowful man, began to listen with something else entirely. It listened with her heart, with an intuition that defied all reason and logic. She didn't recover the memories. The erased pathways remained dark, inaccessible. The past, as he had known it with her, was truly gone for her. Yet, as Daniel finished his agonizing confession, tears tracing paths down his ancient, weary face, Elena looked at him not with the cold assessment of a stranger, but with a profound, almost primal understanding that resonated in her very core. She walked towards him, slowly, deliberately, bridging the vast chasm of lost time. She reached out, her hand gently touching his cheek, tracing the line of his jaw. Her eyes, still devoid of the explicit memories of their shared past, held a new, fragile knowing, a promise. "I don't remember you, Daniel," she said, her voice soft, barely above a whisper. "I don't remember any of it. Not us." She paused, her gaze unwavering, searching his depths. "But I feel it. This emptiness. This strange familiarity. And I believe you." A small, courageous smile touched her lips, a nascent warmth that promised spring after an endless winter. "If I loved you once," she vowed, her voice gaining strength, a quiet declaration in the heart of the universe, "I can love you again." In that profound moment, within the cold, gleaming heart of the Temporal Observatory, Daniel Kovac finally found something more profound than mere survival. He found a reason to live, a purpose beyond endless, solitary observation. He had saved the world, yes, but he had also, against all cosmic odds, been given a second chance at personal salvation. The world outside continued to spin, vibrant and oblivious, entirely unaware of the two scientists within the observatory who had just rewritten their own destiny, stitching together fragments of hope from the ashes of 416 dead worlds. Daniel still carried the immense weight of all those memories, a silent archive of human folly, a constant burden on his soul. But now he had someone beside him, someone who chose to stay, even without remembering why. And perhaps, he thought, as Elena leaned her head against his shoulder, her presence a warmth he hadn't realized he was craving, this was the true difference between Timeline 417 and all the others, not the absence of a destructive discovery, but the presence of a choice made by love, not by fear. The future remained uncertain, as it always had. But for the first time in 417 lives, Daniel Kovac had hope. After 416 cycles of despair, Daniel Kovac dared to intervene, to save a world even if it meant erasing himself from the memory of the woman he loved. A universe hinged on an impossible sacrifice, where a shared past became a forgotten dream. Yet, from the ashes of memory, guided by an unseen thread of destiny and a deep, scientific intuition, Elena Vasquez found her way back to the truth. Not through recollection, but through an unwavering choice of the heart. In the quiet hum of the observatory, amidst the ghosts of forgotten futures, they now stand, not as a memory restored, but as a new beginning forged in unwavering hope. Perhaps the grand tapestry of time is not merely a sequence of events, but a testament to the enduring power of connection. Not merely the fate of civilizations, but the profound resonance of a single conscious choice, a choice to trust, to love, to rebuild even when the foundations of reality tremble. Is it not in the face of insurmountable odds, when all logical paths lead to ruin, that humanity truly finds its deepest strength, its most profound reason to strive for a future worth living? Sometimes, salvation doesn't lie in preventing a catastrophe, but in finding a light strong enough to guide you through the darkness that follows. This tale weaves through countless realities, a testament to the myriad paths existence can take. If you were Daniel, burdened by the echoes of 416 lost worlds, Would you have dared to make the same impossible choice? Or would you have let the cycle continue, preserving your memories, but condemning humanity? Share your thoughts below. What would you have sacrificed for hope? And if the whispers of parallel dimensions and forgotten histories stir something within you, consider diving deeper into the unknown. We have other stories waiting to unravel in the archives of the Silent Orbit. If this journey through time and memory resonated with you, show your support. Like this video, subscribe to the Silent Orbit, and join our expedition into the untold stories of the universe. Until next time, keep watching the stars.